Hey guys, Sean here. Welcome to the F1 Word and to a Monday night live stream all about last week. Oh yes, finger on the pulse here on the F1 Word as always. Hope you're all doing well this Monday evening, morning, afternoon, wherever you are in the world. Good to have you with us this evening. A bit impromptu in a way. Well, sort of. We decided on Friday to do it. A lot of news last week in F1. I was at work, so I couldn't cover any of it. So I thought, you know what? First opportunity, Monday night. Let's get together with Stuart, talk about it all, and try and digest it. A nice way to start the official summer break, I think. So hope you're all doing well. And thank you for joining us. Obviously, all the usual YouTuber spiel, dropping likes, subs and all that. Always appreciated. But we're going to have a good old waffle tonight. Loads to talk about. If you weren't paying attention to the news last week, we've got Perez and Ricciardo reportedly staying where they are for now. We've got Wheatley leaving Red Bull, Carlos Sainz to Williams, Oliver Oakes to Alpine, Jack Doohan probably going to partner Gasly, and Andrea Stella, got it right today, has had a contract extension with McLaren. So it is all kicking off in the world of Formula One, as it tends to do when we get to the summer break. Hey to Brad, to Charles, to Dex as well, to Lee, to Kevin, to Pascal, to Sighted Canvas, to CPB1, Doobie Scoo, great name, says Chamber is the GOAT. Hey to Mikey as well in chat, just a few shout outs before we get going. But yeah, you're right, Kevin. A lot of key people leaving Red Bull. We'll get onto that a little bit later. Hey to Raoul as well. I hope you are. And to Jonathan with love from the Lone Star State. Thank you very much for your support as always. Let's we checked this 24 minutes ago, so it should be working okay. Good evening, Stuart.
Good evening. London calling once again, hopefully in some kind of stereo, maybe.
I'm hearing you on FM.
Perfect.
There we go. It'll do. Yeah, lot of news last week. Obviously, we're going to get into as much of it as we can over the next sort of 90 minutes. Let's be honest, probably 2 hours. What stood out for you last week? That's a good first question. What was the headline that made you most go, wow, really?
I think maybe Sainz to Williams. I wasn't really sure where he was going to go, or when he was going to be locked down somewhere. I think a lot of us were suspecting that Audi would nail him down. They definitely had their eyes on him for quite a while, and the fact that he picked Williams is interesting. Like, I wasn't blown away like this is the most shocking thing I've ever heard in my life, but it was interesting to see Sainz being probably the driver with the most ability to pick and choose what he was going to do with next year, going to Williams and deciding they were the place to be and having confidence in at least the next year or so.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I was quite. So the Sainz one didn't come as much of a surprise to me because I think of the available options, Williams was probably the safest. Again, we'll get into that later. The one that I think really surprised me was Jonathan Wheatley actually leaving Red Bull, because that's, as Kevin said in chat a moment ago, that's a lot of big names are leaving Red Bull, and still links of other big names. Let's not get into that today. To Mercedes won't go away, so it's all a bit shaky at Red Bull at the moment. And actually, Kevin again in chat just saying, two guys thinking what the f with the Checo news. Alex Albon and Pierre Gasly, why didn't they get 9 lives at Red Bull? Yeah, there's gonna be a few people asking that question, but very different circumstances, of course. So we are going to start with that. We are going to start with the. It's not really chronological as such because I can't remember what came first and what followed. To be honest, it was a bit confusing last week. But Sergio Perez is, I have to keep saying reportedly saying, because there's not been an official press release or anything from the team, which the more I think about it actually makes sense. You know, I can't imagine putting a press release out that says something on the lines of, hi everyone, you know, we signed Perez for next season, have made no mention of sacking him. Well, guess what, he's staying. That's really not the way teams operate. So it was put out in the media. Christian Horner apparently addressing the team saying, and I'll quote it here, Checo remains a Red Bull racing driver despite recent speculation, and we look forward to seeing him perform at tracks he's previously excelled at after the summer break. And then a spokesperson confirmed to F1.com when asked that the lineups at Red Bull and RB will remain unchanged after the summer break. So we know Sergio Perez staying at Red Bull for now, and Daniel Ricciardo staying at RB for now. I said it on social media. I stand by it. I'm not saying this isn't true, and I'm not trying to start speculation or anything like that, but I will not believe this until Sergio Perez rolls out in the RB20 in FP1 for Zandvoort. You just never know with Red Bull what they're going to do, but he is staying put. That's what they've decided. A lot of question marks as to why. As Kevin said there, you know, other drivers didn't get the opportunities that Perez is getting, but there's a lot of complex issues with Perez, isn't there? There's a sponsorship, the Mexico fan base, there's a Mexican Grand Prix still to come, of course, the Mexico City Grand Prix. They'll want to capitalise on that. His experience, they haven't also got drivers that they could just move around, you know. as one of the reasons I've listed, no obvious alternative, no guaranteed upgrade. You know, Ricciardo, as of late, has been improving, but I don't think you can honestly sit there and say that Ricciardo is absolutely 100% guaranteed to be a better person in that car than Perez. And the same with Liam Lawson. Do the team want to throw him in at the deep end like they have other drivers in the past? So, you know, all that works in Perez's favour. The track's coming up. So it felt last Sunday, Stuart, when I was doing the reaction with Will, we both sort of said the same. It felt the rhetoric from the team, the performance in the Belgian Grand Prix on the Sunday, you know, great in qualifying to get front row, but then to drop to 8th place in the race, it all kind of felt like it was inevitable that they were going to make a change. But he's still there, and it was quite surprising for that to be not so much that it was announced, but announced so quickly. You know, it was all out on Monday, wasn't it? So that's only the day after the race where he performed so badly, where I think Helmut Marko said something on the lines of he'd collapsed in the race. So I was quite surprised by that.
I do wonder perhaps if what they needed to do was formally decide that he was going to stay, but also just make that public to just get that off Perez's back in a kind of psychological way, to just tell him and everyone else that you're here for the rest of the year. Stop worrying and speculating about that. I know what you said about, you know, maybe some random person will be in the car when we turn up in the Netherlands, but you know, just to kind of calm that side of things down and work with him at getting better over the season, which apparently is what they've been talking about doing, like building a better team around him and working out how to get him in tune with this car. In all honesty, I mean, I agree with you. I think it's not working, Perez being in that second car. I think if they had better options, I think he would be out in this mid-season break. They would have worked out a way to kind of performance clause him out of his contract or pay him off or something. I think two things. I think they have learned from previous attempts of throwing people at this car, this second seat, and it sort of being too much of a baptism of fire and too chaotic and not being able to make it work. And secondly, I don't think they have and this is not to put any of these young drivers down or other drivers down. I don't think they have a stellar crop of options to like pick from. I think, you know, I mean, Verstappen was dropped into the car to replace the number 2. He was definitely a hot pick. I think Albon and also Gasly were pretty hot picks at the time. I think they were definitely like, yeah, this guy can do something. Let's put him in there and see what he can do. So, but now, I mean, Tsunoda's he's good, he's doing well, but he's got that temperament. He's not as amazing as maybe you'd want to be in that car. Ricciardo, again, very kind of unreliable and off the board at the moment. No guarantee that they're going to get him working with that car any better than Perez does. So I think they're probably their best logical option was just trying to make things work with Perez, at least till the end of the year, and sort of, as they say, build a bit of a team around him. But they don't want to throw too many things at him because they want the majority of their resources still around Verstappen, who's scoring the majority of their points.
Yeah, I mean, I went looking around for quotes, like official quotes from the team about why Tsunoda, because I think if you are to make a change, or they were to make a change, he's probably the most obvious option. He's performing better than Ricciardo this season overall. He's definitely progressing, and I think he has to be given the credit for that. But I tried to find something. There's nothing, but I did find something on Autosport that was interesting, and this is all from their sources, of course. So, you know, they understand, it's reported, sources, etc. That Red Bull's, and this is a quote, Red Bull's senior management is understood to not be totally convinced that Yuki Tsunoda has the right mental approach that it thinks is essential to be fighting at the front. So you mentioned there the mentality thing. So maybe that's what Red Bull are thinking of that. A few people said it before in chat about that one. So it's a little bit. You know, I've said it so many times. I think Tsunoda has more than earned an opportunity in that car, but he's not going to get it. So if the options are Ricciardo or Lawson, as you say, maybe learning from the past, don't throw Lawson in too quickly. That's, I think the phrase is absolutely bang on, Stuart. Again, baptism of fire. Throwing him in there too early is daft to me. You're just setting yourself up for failure and him for failure. Putting Ricciardo in there, I don't think he's an upgrade to Perez. I think Ricciardo 5 years ago, if he was on that kind of form, absolutely, let's have a different conversation. But right now, I don't think so. And I think Ricciardo is sorry Aussie fans, but I think he's just about doing enough to keep hold of his own seat without worrying about taking somebody else's, quite frankly. So if he improves, then maybe that situation changes, and the next 4 races are critical, and this is what the team have said. I think his name was Peter, actually. He was in the chat a little bit earlier at the start of the stream. See if it's still there. Says, yeah, read your topic. While Perez is staying, I'm fully convinced Ricciardo will be in the RB20 at Zandvoort and Monza, while Perez will be at the, quote, tracks he excelled at previously. Care to discuss? I actually first saw that comment and thought, is that what Horner meant? But then I read the F1.com thing that they're not changing their lineups at all. So that obviously goes straight out the window. But it's an interesting point on the tracks that he excels on. So we've got Zandvoort, Monza, Baku and Singapore next. In 2021, he finished 8th at Zandvoort, 5th in 2022 and 4th in 2023. At Monza in 2021, he was 5th, 6th in 22 and 2nd in 23. Baku in 21, he was 1st, 22 2nd and 23 1st. So that's a big one to highlight in the calendar for Checo fans. Singapore, there wasn't one in 2021, of course, but 2022 was 1st and 2023 8th. So these are tracks where he's got great results at in the past. I highlight Baku every year for Perez because even in a Force India, he pulled out some fantastic results against all the odds. So he knows that track well. He enjoys a street track, as we keep talking about before, or we've talked about a lot before. So I think these are tracks that are critical. And I wonder if that comment from Horner is less about swapping drivers around between the races, because I don't believe that will be the case, and more about pointing to these next sort of few races as you need to step it up, Checo, because, and this is the point I need to make, after Singapore, there's another gap before the US Grand Prix where they could make a swap. And I'm wondering if they are highlighting these next few races that he's excelled at in the past as tracks they need to see him turn things around. Otherwise, we might see a swap before Austin.
It's kind of a poison chalice, isn't it?
Yeah.
On the one hand, he's sort of saying, we're keeping Checo around these next few Grand Prix. He's really good at them. He's going to step up his game. He's going to give us some points and stuff like that. But on, the undertones are, but if you don't, if we don't on the circuits you're actually supposed to be good at, then there's not much more we can do for you. And you're right. I mean, they could still put someone in before the end of the season, one way or another. And I think, in the months previous, when we were talking about maybe Red Bull replacing Checo and saying it would probably be good for them if they're looking at someone for 2025 to get them in this season and get them some races to kind of acclimatize, even if they don't do any better than maybe Checo would have done. At least they've got half a season's worth of working with that team, working with that car to kind of get them up and running for next season. So there's still an opportunity for them to do that. And they've got to bear in mind that any drivers they may be thinking of getting in that aren't specifically locked down within their own driver program, there are still teams looking to snap people up. Audi's still looking, Alpine are still looking, although we'll get to them later. Mercedes still need a seat. So there's still, if they want a hot driver somewhere, they need to grab him because he might not be waiting until winter to find out if that Red Bull seat is open.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think you made the point as well about getting a team behind him, the support he needs. I read today there's even some talk about potentially rolling back updates if they need to make the car more comfortable for him and get some people around him who know how to sort of adapt drivers to cars. But I'm very aware I'm saying this sat in my office at home and it's very easy for me to say, but I feel like a driver with the experience of Checo should be able to adapt to these things. But then at the same time, if a car is built to a specific driving style, as a lot of people keep telling me the Red Bull is, then maybe it's not that simple. But I feel like, we're not talking about a Liam Lawson or we've got lots of rookies coming in potentially next year. I'm not talking about an Ollie Behrman or whatever. He's not a young driver, Checo. He's been around a long time, and it's only fair as I look at the picture of them both on screen now. I've used this argument for Daniel Ricciardo in the past about having to be, he should be experienced enough and mature enough now to be able to adapt to a car rather than having to make the car work for him. So I kind of feel like I have to say the same for Checo, but I also want to again reiterate the point. It's not as simple as that. It's never as simple as just adapt to the car then, because if it was, then everyone would be fighting for the world championship, wouldn't they, in these cars? So it's not that simple. But do you get what I mean? I just think that it's all right saying we need to roll back updates for him and put a team around him. That's all good to hear. It shows that they are putting the effort in and not maybe putting every bit of blame at his door. But he also there needs to be less of this from a certain corner of the fan base, poor Checo, he's done nothing wrong, this is all the team's fault. He's got to take some responsibility, and I'm sure he does with the team, but I'm just saying some of his fans don't necessarily feel the same. But, let's not get into social media, for goodness sake.
I do wonder, actually, to sort of maybe throw a bone Checo's way, in a way. Red Bull have traditionally, they've had a long history of, going back to the Vettel days, going back to sort of 2011, not 2010, because maybe in those times they weren't entirely sure who was going to be the stronger driver. But of getting very firmly behind their number one driver and maybe not abandoning, but not giving as much support, not working with their second driver as well, and just kind of letting them get on with it and sort of and deal with it. I can't tell you exactly what goes on within that team, but that's the kind of impression you get. Everything goes behind this kind of like superstar driver they've got in the number one car, and the second driver sort of seems to be left to fend for themselves. And I'm wondering if, because we've seen Perez had these problems last year and other drivers as well in that second seat have had these kind of problems, that they just don't seem to have systems in place to work with these second drivers and get them working with the car. Because it is partly like, yes, you're a multi-million pound top tier driver, you should be able to adapt, but I think you also need the team behind you to work with you, that allow you to feedback, allow you to get parts on the car or setup changes, or have some say in the development that allows you to work and get the results the way you want them to. So I wonder if the relationship there needs strengthening, maybe on both sides, maybe from Sergio, maybe from the team as well. And that seems to be the thing they're talking about, is sort of just working with him more and adapting him and the car together to get better results. And I think that's probably something they need to do long term, no matter who's in that car. I think they've been caught out this year because they're not the dominant team, and now the constructors title is, and unless they bring a big upgrade after the summer, kind of slipping away. It's since we came back to Europe, it's McLaren have caught them at an average of 9 points per race, and they're close enough in theory to overtake them in one race weekend if they get a 1-2 and Red Bull don't score any points. So I think this sort of focus on Max and maybe getting a bit lost in some of their development has left them kind of vulnerable in ways they probably didn't realize they had to think about. And now they're kind of, I don't know, I think it's a sort of a philosophy within the team about that number two seat that's kind of catching them out now.
Do you think, and I don't want to get into this too much because we hear hours doing this, do you think there's an element of Red Bull waiting on Verstappen? Do you think there's a part of Red Bull going, right, well, we can't let Perez go just yet, just in case Verstappen does snap and go to Mercedes? I don't think it's going to happen. Certainly not for 2025. Maybe 2026 is probably the most likely, but I'm still not convinced on that one. But if you've got a driver like Verstappen and you're struggling to replace one driver, can you really afford to go sacking Perez if you haven't got anyone else to? Because who is there available on the market now? Sainz has just signed for Williams, so what have you got? You've got Antonelli, who is a junior, so that's a risk. You've got Lawson, who's a risk. You've got Ricciardo, you're not sure on. You've got Tsunoda, you won't promote. You've got Perez, who you're not sure on. And then you look at the rest of the market, you've only got your juniors like Isaac Hadjar. So although I'm not saying that I think that Verstappen will go to Mercedes, I'm just wondering if maybe they're thinking, let's just wait until Max says to us, definitively, I'm going nowhere until the end of my contract, or I'm staying here for 25 and 26. And then they can say, right, now let's make a change. I know that's might be a bit much, but I'm just wondering, because I'm struggling to see how if they don't go with Ricciardo, or they do decide to give Tsunoda the chance, I don't know who takes that seat if they drop Checo. And if Verstappen walks away, I think they're they're up that creek without that paddle, essentially.
Yeah. And you're right. This is a lot more speculative. But on the other hand, the team is moving in a direction that I don't think they foresaw in several ways. The performance relative to other teams is down, and if anything, getting worse. They're definitely leading the both titles at the moment, but that's based on a lot of good work at the beginning of the season. A lot of people are leaving for one reason or another. I think I think the stuff that happened at the beginning of the season with Christian Horner has caused some bad blood in general, and some people are unhappy with that and leaving, and some people are leaving because they are excited by other projects elsewhere. I don't think it's all that, but I think there is a number of people leaving that team, and that's quite alarming. And I don't think that team is necessarily, at the beginning of the year preseason, we were locked down for this team. This team is where you want to be 2024, 2025. That's the championship winning team. And now that's not so obvious. And there are already question marks over 2026 because we don't know how they're going to handle these big new power unit changes. And we're thinking like maybe other teams and other engine suppliers will steal a run on them. So now if you're Max Verstappen, especially when your father has fallen out with the team boss in a way that's making him very uncomfortable. He's spoken about that before. And you might be thinking, if I want to keep up this run, if I want to keep winning races, do I want to be somewhere else? Then yes, that is a possibility that I think won't be missed on Red Bull. Whether or not Perez is the anchor that's going to be that's going to save that and keep them from dropping too far, I don't know. But at least he's a known pair of hands, and if they want to, they can mold the car around it or something, or at least give them some stability going forward. Because you're right, if Verstappen leaves, then either at the end of this season or the end of next season, they've not got an equivalent to pick from at the moment.
Kevin gets 100 bonus internet points for mentioning the TV show Schitt's Creek in chat. What a show. If you haven't watched it, go and watch it. Absolutely love that show. A couple of comments that are well worth a read here. So Nick surfaces, without Newey, no one at RB or Red Bull, knows how to optimize or update the car anymore. Red Bull are screwed. And Raul says, rolling back updates makes him comfortable but drops performance. So he loses 0.2 in performance and then 10th to max in ability, and we are back to 0.3. It's a good point. Rolling back updates is all right as a potential solution, but if that loses you performance and you're still losing time to your teammate, then Raul's right. You're just causing more problems, aren't you, potentially? But you could then spin that the other way and say, yes, you might say 0.2 in performance, but if Checo feels more comfortable in the car and he's able to find 0.2 in his own performance, then, you're sort of back where you were, and then he can improve from there, I guess. But I guess my point on that is that actually there's not a lot of time to bounce back, is there, for him? He's not got. We've only got 10 races left to go this season. Longer than the World Championship was when it started. And great to see as well. Dr. Obbs in the chat. Thank you for popping along, mate. Good to see you. Follow you on Twitter. Lots of great insights. Says it's pretty typical that teams who are dominating like Red Bull Racing was experience turnover from other teams poaching their talent. Not unusual. We're going to get onto that in a moment on Jonathan Wheatley because I've got a couple of questions on there for chat and for you as well, Stuart. So just to finish off on driver swap gate that never happened. Daniel Ricciardo, we've kind of glossed over him in terms of the fact he's staying. I did make the point earlier that I feel like he's done enough to probably keep his seat for now rather than worrying about taking somebody else's seat. But he's staying. I think whilst I'm not blown away by his performances, the fact that he has improved in recent weeks and recent races, I think it's only then perhaps fair to let him stay on for now and see how he gets on. If he keeps improving, maybe he'll hang on for next year, but I'm not convinced, and actually this goes for Perez as well, by the way, I'm not totally convinced that both of them will be in the Red Bull family in seats next season. I think if Perez is still there, Ricciardo will be dropped and will be replaced by Lawson. And I think if Ricciardo improves and Perez gets dropped and Ricciardo gets moved up, then Lawson will be in the RB. I don't think both of them will be there next season. But he's staying for now. He is improving, Stuart. I know we poke a bit of fun every now and again, but he is improving. There's no doubt about that. But it's not, and with all due respect, like I said, I'm not trying to be one of those, clickbaity, edgy people trying to just wind people up or whatever, but it wasn't a particularly high bar to improve from, was it? How he was at times. So I think he's definitely taken a step forward, and I hope that continues. And I think I'm looking forward to that Tsunoda Ricciardo dynamic in the second half, let's say, of this season.
Yeah, me too. His second half, essentially the last 6 races really have been an improvement on where he was in the first half. He scored all his points, for example, in the second half, which is half. So he's got basically half of Tsunoda's points, but he didn't really score in the first half of the season. So you could argue he's kind of on pace with him now. He's an enigma though, isn't he? I think the team probably know best sort of where he is, but he does, and also that from the outside that car is quite hard to judge in terms of performance because it sort of wavers around a bit weekend to weekend. I think he's I think he's doing okay. I think beginning of this season, I was very kind of much. Oh, he's gone. He's not the Ricardo we knew. It's over for Daniel. But I think if he continues sort of roughly where he is right now, I think he'd be a steady hand to keep on for that team next year. And I think it makes sense they're hanging on to him. I still don't think he'll be moved up to Red Bull. I just can't see it. I wouldn't be like flabbergasted because, as we said, Red Bull, not a lot to pick from. But I don't think he's necessarily put in the results and showing himself to be at that level yet. But they have worked with him before, and they do know how he works. So maybe they would know if they feel he can, if they feel he can make it work. So yeah, I think he's doing fine. I don't think he's in like the danger zone that we thought he was sort of earlier on in the year, and at least he hasn't broken his hand this time.
Yeah, and I think you're right on there's nobody, they haven't got a lot to choose from. But I think I've made this point to you before, Stuart, and to others as well on the stream. But that whole they've not got a lot to choose from is a problem of their own making. Picking up Sergio Perez at the end of 2020, yes it was, wasn't it? Seemed like the right thing to do at the time. Albon wasn't quite delivering as people wanted him to. Perez was available. He just won a race as well, of course, at Sakir. Had his best season in F1 to date at that point. It made a lot of sense. But then you're blocking junior drivers coming through. Then you bring back Ricciardo, having just taken De Vries, who wasn't a Red Bull junior, and you're still blocking. You've created a bottleneck at the top of the team, and it's all their own making. Which I think, to be fair, if you sat down and you spoke to them candidly about it, I think Red Bull probably say, yeah, it probably is, but the hand we were dealt at the time, Sergio Perez was the right way to go, and Nick De Vries wasn't performing, and Daniel Ricciardo was the only driver available to us. So their hands were kind of tied in that respect, but it is still an issue of their own making. I think, again, with respect to, I think particularly Ricciardo, since we're on him at the moment, with respect to him and to everything he has achieved in F1, people will sneer at it, but he's won races, picked up podiums, he's done a great job. He was battling hard with Verstappen as teammates. He was great in his first stint at Red Bull. So with respect to him, they beat Sebastian Vettel. I know Vettel had kind of checked out, but it doesn't matter, does it? He still did it. I think now maybe it's a time to move him on and start to bring through Lawson or Hadjar or Iwasa if he performs over in Super Formula. I don't know if they go with two Japanese drivers at RB, but it's just the point to make there. So hopefully Danny Rick can find some form for RB between now and the end of the season, and maybe something will open up somewhere. But I think Red Bull need to start either treating that like a junior team or, controversial take, potentially sell it to somebody who is going to use it. Mm-hmm. I don't know. That's just my view on that. But whilst we're on the topic of Red Bull, Jonathan Wheatley announced he was leaving in... when was it Thursday? I think that one came out. It all got very muddled up last year. So, on Thursday. So, rather surprisingly, I have to say, that Jonathan Wheatley is leaving the team to take up the role of team principal at Audi. He will remain in his position at Red Bull until the end of 2024. And as you'd expect, a period of gardening leave will follow his exit. The team said in an official statement that they have tremendous strength and depth, and they will announce a new team structure in the coming weeks. It caught Audi by surprise by the look of it. I don't think they were expecting... maybe they were expecting it to be announced that Wheatley was leaving, but not for Red Bull to reveal where he was going, because a few hours later, Audi confirmed that news, adding that Wheatley will complete Audi's new F1 management team, which is a dual role, I believe, with Mattia Binotto, but he will be team principal and management spokesperson, and that'll be by July 2025 at the latest. So that means he's leaving Red Bull end of this year, 6 months gardening leave, 7 months gardening leave, really, and then on his way to Audi. As I said earlier, Stuart, it was a bit of a surprise, and it was the one that probably shocked me the most this week. But it probably shouldn't have been, actually, because I was looking back through news reports on Jonathan Wheatley earlier in the year, and he was apparently shopping around because he fancied the role of a team principal somewhere. And he was actually linked as Christian Horner's successor if Horner was to go with everything that happened over the winter, if they decided to make the change and sack him and bring in Jonathan Wheatley. He would be one of the preferred options. So it's probably not a great surprise that he was shopping around. Then, of course, Audi, they like to change their management every several weeks. So, if somebody like Jonathan Wheatley's available, go for it. But I think he's a great signing for Audi. And actually, I think he's going to be a bigger loss to Red Bull than a lot of people might think.
Yeah, I mean, he's been at that team 18 years, 2006, I think he joined from Renault.
Is that the year before Newey?
I think it might have been.
Yeah, it's 2007.
Everything's yeah. So I think he's got a lot of value in having seen Red Bull turn itself from a fairly new team into a powerhouse of race wins and titles and performance, I think. And I think that's the kind of experience Audi are going to need to understand how they turn what is essentially the worst team on the grid right now into one of the best, which is what they hope for. So yeah, I think that's going to be interesting to see. And it was interesting that he was looking at moving on. He was never obviously going to get team principal role at Red Bull Racing, unless something dramatic happens. I guess something dramatic did happen, and he still didn't get it. So if you think about it, I think he's a great catch for Audi, and I think it kind of shows how serious they are, because we haven't seen. I could be wrong because my memory's terrible. We haven't seen huge moves from Audi yet, like big power plays, as far as I remember, unless you're going to correct me right now.
Andreas Seidel was quite a big statement at the time, wasn't it, I suppose, because he was doing really well at McLaren, was really highly rated. So maybe him, but I know what you mean. I know nobody should go, wow. But yeah, I think Andreas Seidel, I get the two mixed up, Stella and Seidel. But yeah, I think he maybe could go into that category.
Yeah, and I think the two of them together, I think, going to be really interesting for that team. I think watching Sauber/Audi over the next year and a half, I guess, from now up to the point where they actually go into the winter before becoming Audi, I think is going to be really interesting. So I think we need to start seeing what their plans are going to be. I think we need to. I'm not expecting big things in 2026. I'm not expecting them to come out of the gate being, transforming from Caterpillar Sauber into Butterfly Audi. But I am now interested in the moves they're making, and of course, with Jonathan Wheatley there, that's going to be. It makes the team look more attractive for the kind of drivers they want to put in that seat as well, even though Sainz decided not to go with them after all.
I tell you what it does do, the whole appointment of Wheatley, it makes me feel a little bit more positive about the Mattia Binotto appointment, because when I saw that he was going to be taking on sort of team leadership roles and the technical side, I thought, oh, no, don't put him in a leadership role. Lovely guy, I'm sure, but we've heard some pretty bad stories, haven't we, from Ferrari and his leadership. So to have it confirmed now that Jonathan Wheatley is coming in a senior position as team principal, and Mattia Binotto is going to probably have more focus perhaps in this dual role on the technical side, which is where he excels. I think that's a really, as Pascal put it in chat, he says that's a bit of a coup. I think it's quite a big coup for Audi, and I agree with a few others saying that you can't expect team personnel. Lewis says it, you can't expect him to put his career on hold just on the hope that he might get a Red Bull promotion. I absolutely agree. If he wants to be team principal, then go for it. Because his role at the minute, he's sporting director, and that's usually around things sort of operational and sporting aspects, isn't it? So it's things like car builds, personnel, travel logistics, trackside operations, that kind of thing. So sometimes things like pit stops as well. So it's a massive role that he holds. So they're going to feel that, Red Bull. They absolutely will. And when you couple that with Adrian Newey going, it's quite a hammer blow for the team. And this is what I wanted to ask you. I was thinking about this after Newey went and the Verstappen rumours started earlier this year. So we may have discussed it, so apologies if we have. But this feels not the same, but reminiscent of Ferrari 2006, Benetton in the mid-90s when Schumacher left, and Brawn, and then at Ferrari when Brawn, Schumacher and Todd and all that. It feels a little bit like that. At this, I know that's, some might see that as stretching a bit because, the Schumacher, so Verstappen hasn't gone, and the Todd, the Christian Horner, hasn't gone. They're still there. But it feels a little bit like Red Bull are hitting a bit of a transitional phase, which has happened, as somebody said in chat earlier, so many times through history. I think it was Dr. Rob said it in chat earlier. People move on from these dominant teams, and Red Bull do feel a little bit, they're in decline on the track, and it feels like that's now starting to rumble through the team, and maybe we're reaching that point where Red Bull are going to have a few years, maybe in 2026, as the runners-up or as the third fastest team, as they build back to being title winners again. It happens all the time in Formula One. So I'm sure somebody older than me will be able to go through history and talk about other teams that have gone through this. But it's particularly Ferrari 2000. I think it's 2006 sort of stands out to me.
Yeah, I think if you're a big organization, whether you're in Formula One or whatever, you sort of, if you're planning on long-term success, you sort of try and build in safeguards for turnover, even if they're really important big people. If your team principal leaves, if your director of X whatever leaves, you sort of have a strong team in place. You have like sub managers and things ready to move up. You're ready in the pipeline to kind of make sure that you can continue without feeling too much of a hit. And Jonathan Wheatley, as you say, had a big role. He was sort of integrated into everything. Has been there for 18 years. And I think in particular he'll be quite a vacuum for that team, more than Newey, in my opinion. And I say that because I think Newey's role is not sort of hands into everything, guiding the entire like design team. Everyone reports through Newey, that kind of thing. I think he was more of. I think someone described it as the magic sprinkles. He sort of comes up with ideas and he floats them to the team, and they work with that. He has insights and things, but he's not essentially the design team. I think you can sort of work without him. I think it's harder if several people leave at the same time or within a short period of time to kind of fill in that gap seamlessly and not feel the effects of it. And I think that's what Red Bull need to be wary of in the next couple of seasons as the effects of that start to ripple out into performance. They need to hopefully have someone ready to fill Jonathan Wheatley's role. Might be two people temporarily. I don't know what their structure is able to fill that gap. But he clearly knew everything. It was logistics, it was pit crews, it was ensuring like the team is following the technical regulations. It's it was a very high level involved job with a lot of information. So yeah, they are going to be feeling that. I think time will tell whether they're in this transitional period. Like you say, they've still got, the big boss and the big driver, but that can change quite quickly. I mean, Christian Horner's been there for a very long time as well, and he may at some point decide that's it. Max Verstappen, as we know, maybe a little bit uncomfortable, but also only a few years left on his contract, and we don't know what he wants to do. It's not set in stone. So in the next 5 years, I know that's quite a long time, but it comes around quickly. This team could be in a very different place, and they need to prepare to keep up the levels of success that they want without feeling the aftershocks of people like this leaving.
Yeah, I agree. And Helmut Marko as well, not committing beyond sort of the short term, has he? He's only confirmed he's around for a little bit longer. So, like you say, it could change very quickly with Horner and with Verstappen. I feel like Horner has the backing of the tyre owners, doesn't he? And they're the majority owners, so he's probably sitting a bit more pretty than perhaps others in the team. But I'm not. There were murmurings that Wheatley wasn't happy with what had come out over the winter regarding Horner and all of that, and maybe that has played a part. But I think this is very much a case of, as we've already discussed, a guy wants to progress in his career, and he's been given the opportunity with a manufacturer. Just entering F1, you just would, wouldn't you? You just would. Operating logistics is great, but if you've been doing that for, 18 years or part of that for 18 years and that role's developed, it's maybe time to do something new. So I can't blame him at all. And obviously wish him the best of luck, and hopefully he'll take Audi on to be mega, and they end up more like they have a really solid debut rather than anything like Toyota, who had all the hype behind them and never really did a lot apart from empty all the fuel out in qualifying and stick it on pole every now and again.
Yeah. I will briefly say that his sporting director role is much more closely aligned with the team principal role than, say, Binotto was, who came from kind of very technical side. I think he is more about, because team principal stuff is kind of logistics, people management, getting the teams working together and things like that, managing different parts of your race team working together in harmony, which is team principal is just sort of a different flavor of that kind of role. So I think he'll slide into that, hopefully, a lot more easily than Binotto did.
Yeah, I agree. He's massive experience as well, isn't he? So I think a great coup for Audi, big loss for Red Bull, but it happens in Formula One, so they'll have to shake themselves down and get on with it, and we'll see what happens in the coming weeks. But I won't be surprised if we hear of more exits. And I think the Verstappen rumours are going to stick around until Mercedes make a decision basically on their driver, aren't they? They're never going to go away. They'll be here forever, but we'll see what happens. It's that's the team to watch at the moment, and I'm going to go out on a limb as well, sort of putting the two topics we've discussed together now, Perez and Ricciardo, and obviously Wheatley. Let me know what you think in chat. McLaren favourites for the constructors, Stuart?
In my opinion, yes. I'm still standing by that.
Yeah.
I was sort of hesitant about it a few months ago, but actually now, yes.
Yeah, I agree. I still think Max has got enough in the drivers to hang on. And he can, even if he's not, I mean, you know, he didn't have a great weekend in Hungary for one reason or another, and Belgium, he had the penalty, but he still finished 5th and 4th and extended his lead in Belgium as well. So I still think he can do enough to hang on to that. But the constructors, yeah, I think McLaren are looking good, and Ferrari aren't a million miles away from Red Bull either, actually, by the way. They're going to need to hit some consistency, though, first, for goodness sake. But yes, please do drop a like, by the way. 222 of you here. Thank you for joining us this Monday evening. 48 likes. Let's see if we get over 100. That'd be absolutely fantastic. Don't forget to subscribe as well if you are new. Thank you to those who have subscribed. Thank you to Giuliano, to Ronan, and to Franz for subbing this evening, and to Richard as well. Thank you very much. Massively appreciate the support. I'm supposed to be on holiday this week. This is supposed to be my week where I log off from all socials for F1 for a week. But I wanted to do this, and there's some stuff going on behind the scenes, which hopefully, again, I'll be able to tell you about soon. So I'll be around, but there might not be any content the rest of this week. I'm not going to commit to anything, but obviously we'll see what happens. Yeah, that was it, really. That was it. That's all I wanted to say. Carlos Sainz. It has rumbled on and on and on and on since February. He was going to Mercedes, he was going to Williams, he was going to Audi, then he was going to Williams, then he's off to Alpine, then he was going to Williams again, then it was Alpine, then it was rallying. I think some people even threw in there in chat before about we might go do that for a year, maybe a sabbatical. He denied that. Turns out all along it was Williams, which, yeah, early last week finally revealed Carlos Sainz will be racing for Williams in 2025. Loved the press release because if you saw my post on Twitter, you'll now understand why I put that. They put Carlos Sainz to race for Williams in 2025, 2026 and beyond. And all I can think of was Buzz Lightyear because I'm a loser. So yeah, he's even been linked with Red Bull in the past as well. Actually, he's on my list here. But it became apparent quite recently, or actually what feels like an eternity ago now, that it was probably between Williams, Sauber and Alpine. And of the three, he's gone for Williams. And I think if I was in Carlos Sainz's position, and though they were my three realistic options, Alpine are in absolute God knows what at the moment. They're all over the place, although we'll get onto them in a bit. They've got some good news this week, or last week. They're all over the place. Audi, you know, Sauber have got a pretty poor car, and it looks like next year will be just as bad and transitional because it's going to be last year's car into next year, of course, or 2024 car into 2025 while they wait for Audi. There are no guarantees Audi are going to deliver. Of all the teams that he was most likely to end up at, Williams feels like the team moving in the right direction and probably could give him the best package and the reassurances for the future that others couldn't. So I think it is the right choice. But I'm kind of glad that he assessed everything first. I know it's been frustrating that 1 week he's going one place and the next week he's going somewhere else, but I think it's good that he took his time over that because I think I read actually that James Vowles had to give him sort of some pretty sensitive Williams information, which with respect, I'm pretty sure Ferrari won't want some pretty sensitive Williams information and data sort of on weight and things like that to sort of go towards convincing him to join the team. So they really wanted him, which we knew anyway from James Vowles. But it seems like, again, of the available options, Stuart, probably the best one that he could have gone for. But I still think it's a little bit just the way it falls sometimes, but harsh that his choices were. A driver like Carlos Sainz, who's won races recently, has performed so well, was choosing between Williams, Sauber and Alpine.
Yeah, and I felt bad about him ever since, you know, Ferrari announced they were giving a seat to someone else. Because, I mean, this is where Sainz really should be. He should be in a car like a Ferrari or something because he's in that part of his career where he should be capitalizing on where he is right now. His performance is great. His racecraft is great. He's ready to keep fighting for wins and things. I think in some ways a little bit better than Ferrari at the moment, because Ferrari are sort of inconsistent and slightly all over the place. But yeah, I think he will be disappointed in a kind of general sense. I think that disappointment has maybe been dealt with earlier in the year, and I do think Williams makes the most sense, especially as I don't think that Mercedes door was really open, and the Red Bull door also closed. I think he was definitely sort of the cork in the bottle of all of this driver stuff. And I think between him and the speculation over Perez, I think that was what was holding everything up, because I do wonder if there was part of him thinking, if Red Bull do want to get rid of Perez mid-season, I'm the best person they could ask, despite all that dad drama stuff going on behind the scenes. Yeah, I think there was a lot of stuff holding on. The thing about Williams is, and I know they're not performance-wise in terms of the field right now, they're not great, and they sort of had some struggles this year with parts, and they're a little bit behind in their sort of season pipeline and all that kind of things. But I do think James Vowles is a very convincing boss. I don't mean convincing as in persuasive. I mean like actually his credentials and what he's doing with the team and what he's able to, I think when he comes to Sainz and says, this is what we're doing with the team, this is where we are right now, these are our goals, these are our plans, I think that's very convincing and evidential. He's talked about he's got solid plans for 25, 26, and plan for 2027 is in development. He says the investors, Doralton, are not the kind of people who are freaking out and looking for short-term results. They know it's going to take time, so they're sitting back. They're investing the money. They're not expecting overnight results. They know the plan. I think Williams is a strong team right now in terms of getting their roots stuck in, turning things around, looking to the future, and looking to develop. We know about the stuff with the Excel spreadsheet, but that's kind of like a metaphor for the whole team. And I think turning around where they were, he said just the systems weren't in place. Everything was in disarray. People weren't working together. I didn't know, I would look up car parts. I didn't know how old they were or how many races they've been in. It was just, that kind of thing. It was all a bit of a mess, and he's got it all kind of focused now. The team has taken on hundreds of people. They're now over 1,000 people strong. So I think, yeah. And, compared to other teams, like, as you say, Alpine are in turmoil. Audi are sort of uncertain right now. They're definitely not doing great now. So I think sitting with Williams for a couple of years, working with them, having Albon signed up for a multi-year contract already, I think that's very convincing. I think it kind of speaks to sort of where Williams are now, because Albon probably could have gone somewhere that right now is a bit stronger in performance. He could have gone to Haas. He could have gone to, wherever. Yeah, I think it's probably a good move. I don't think Williams' current performance necessarily speaks to what Williams are and can be, and I think it will be an interesting place over the next couple of years that I think he can prove himself in. The way we look at Albon now and be like, yeah, Albon's doing great. He's having a great season. He's doing really great with Williams. He's still a great driver. His actual point score hasn't taken away from that.
He'll have options as well, won't he, in that contract? I mean, Dell's just said in chat, Williams offered the contract that's easiest to get out of should he choose. There'll be options in that contract that if Williams don't deliver, he can move on, or if a Ferrari come back to him, or Mercedes or Red Bull want him, he'll have an out, because that's just how these contracts work, isn't it? But I agree, it's a great place for him to go. Even for a couple of years while he waits to see what happens with the driver market in 26 and who's where, and maybe look at a change for 27. But I think, and I agree with what you're saying on James Vowles about him being convincing. He could probably convince me anything, to be honest. He's just one of those. I listen to him and I'm sort of like, this guy knows what he's talking about. He's great. And I think he's a great addition to Williams, and I think he's going to shake that team up. There's a lot of big appointments as well, aren't there, that we've seen in recent months that I think are being held up on gardening leave and things like that, but that are coming into the team with a lot of experience, and that's really going to help Williams going forward. They've got the Mercedes deal confirmed again, haven't they? They've extended that deal, so they've got that backing, which a lot of people think is going to be the engine to beat again. Obviously 2026 is the aero and the chassis and everything that all mixes up, but it won't all be about the engine in 2026 like it was in 2014 mostly, but they're the ones to beat apparently in that front. So having that Mercedes power is going to be a big boost. Look at what Williams did in 2014 when they had that Mercedes power, and I mean, was it 2015 Bottas and Massa, or 2014 on the front row in Austria or something, locking out the front row and challenging for podiums and big points. So it could be another chance for them to leap forward. So it could be a really great spot for Carlos Sainz. And I think if Williams made that kind of progression, I think James Vowles would do pretty well at maintaining that. I'd love to see Williams. It's nothing against Red Bull, okay? Not even against Mercedes, but I would love to see a season of Ferrari, McLaren, and Williams back at the front. It'll feel like the world is healing, Stuart. I'll feel young again for a few minutes. I'd quite like, but I think I agree with James Vowles. I think he's a great man at that team. But also, I've written in my notes. I mean, what a lineup that is. Carlos Sainz and Alex Albon. Alex Albon is doing such a great job at Williams. Carlos Sainz is winning races at the moment at Ferrari. He won in was it Australia his last win? So he's won some races. He's a match for Leclerc in a lot of areas. They're very closely matched, and Leclerc's seen as this big superstar at Ferrari and the chosen one. And it's a great lineup, and I'm really excited to see that dynamic next year and seeing how that works. And they're also both very good team players as well, which I think will work well at Williams. So as a few people pointed out in chat, maybe he was convinced by the fact that Williams have more than one strategy. Perhaps, or a strategy that works would be nice. But just a couple of things to read off my notes here from what Williams have said. So it is a multi-year, a 2-year deal with agreement with options to extend. So options on both sides, I assume that will be. Sainz very happy to announce that he'll be joining Williams. This year's driver market has been exceptionally complex for various reasons. Understatement. That it has taken me some time to announce my decision. That's why, because it is complex. Fully confident that Williams is the right place for me to continue my F1 journey. I'm extremely proud of joining such a historic and successful team. The ultimate goal of bringing Williams back to where it belongs at the front of the grid is a challenge that I embrace with excitement and positivity. James Vowles says, I truly believe that the core of every successful team lies amongst their people and their culture. Williams is synonymous with heritage and pure racing. The foundations of the project that lies ahead of us are very strong, and I am really looking forward to being part of it starting next year. Sorry, that's Sainz saying that. And then James Vowles says that the signing is a statement of intent from both parties. Carlos demonstrated time and again that he's one of the most talented drivers on the grid with race-winning pedigree, and this underlines the upward trajectory, I can't say that word, you know what it is, we are on. Carlos brings not just experience and performance, but also a fierce drive to extract every millisecond out of the car, and that fits the team perfectly, basically. Anything else on there? No, I don't think so. Just Alex and Carlos, a formidable driver lineup. Absolutely agree. That's going to be great next year. They do also say, and I think people might need to sit down, this is bad news. They've thanked Logan Sargeant for his hard work and dedication over the past 2 years, and added they will give Logan every support as he looks to continue his racing career for 2025 and into the future. Logan Sargeant, of course, will be leaving Williams at the end of the year. Probably not a massive surprise, even if they hadn't signed Carlos Sainz. I think he probably was on borrowed time anyway. Although it looks as though he will see out the season from sort of what I'm reading, which is probably a positive for Logan, who he's trying, and he has shown improvement, particularly in qualifying in recent races. I mean, we've been screaming about him on the quali watch along, so maybe they're giving him the benefit of the doubt, giving him to the end of the season. But I guess my question then, Stuart, and I think I know the answer, but I'll throw it at you anyway. Do you think Logan Sargeant will find a seat in F1 next year, or do you think he'll be off somewhere like IndyCar?
Yeah, I think he's definitely moving on. There's going to be no one clamoring for him. He's a good racer. He's good. He's just not quite, at the level where people are going to be looking to sign him unless they get themselves into a pickle, because there's actually plenty of other drivers, both sort of junior and current, that are tasty enough in the driver market to kind of block out anywhere he might end up going, unless Red Bull get themselves very confused with how to fill that second seat, which would be I would watch that. I would watch a Max Verstappen, Logan Sargeant lineup. That would be amazing. So I think he's off to do something else now. I think he had a sort of unspectacular, but not, I don't think I'll look back at Logan Sargeant's 3 years in F1 and think that was the worst thing I've ever seen. I think he just wasn't quite, Supremo level, which happens. But not the kind of driver where you're like, oh, he's just bringing in the money and he's dragging the whole team down with him. I think he just sort of wasn't quite there. But he came at a time where Williams was sort of rebuilding anyway. So, maybe a couple of points lost along the way, but not loads. We're not talking dragging it down like Perez is kind of level.
He's not cost them a driver's championship or a constructor's Azzy or anything like that. So, yeah. Well, he's improving, as a couple of people just said in chat as well. He's improving, but maybe too late now. Maybe that's it. So, good luck to him. I hope he has a good end to the season. There were some rumours a few weeks ago that he'd done a deal with IndyCar already, so maybe he's got a seat for next year. But I think if you're James Vowles, there had to be a change, and if Carlos Sainz is available, you've got to go all out for him, and that's exactly what Vowles has done. He's got his driver, which has to be applauded, definitely. Apparently, Moray just threw a curveball. Logan is Wolverine's real name. Ryan Reynolds has just made a film featuring Wolverine. Ryan Reynolds owns Alpine. Logan to Alpine confirmed? ? You see, there's always a link. Ryan Reynolds has been all over my feed on Twitter or X or whatever this week for some reason. So, although to be honest, it's been a nice relief from some of the stuff that's been on there. So there you go. I don't know why he's there, but he just is.
You don't know why he's all over your feed?
No.
Okay, well, it's a very big Marvel film out at the moment. It's just come out that he's in.
Oh yeah, the livery, the Alpine livery. That's how I remember that film. Yeah. That's just the Alpine livery. Well, that'll be why then. Yeah, fair enough. I'm going to confess now. I haven't been to the cinema since Half-Blood Prince.
Oh, was that was it? That was peak cinema for you. You thought it's not going to get better than this. I'm never coming back.
Well, that moment happened. Spoiler alert. That moment happened, and that was it for me. I just couldn't go back to the cinema. It was too traumatic. That fictional character, yeah. Oh god, it was devastating. Anyway, yeah, it's been, yeah, exactly. CPB, it's been that long. Appalling, really. But I just think it's cheaper just renting them when they come out on Sky or whatever. Just waiting a second. I think we're having a Discord problem. Saying we've disconnected. Just bear with me a second. It could be my end. I might just need to do a reboot. There we go. I think we're back.
Hooray!
Yeah, just disconnect. That was right. I've never seen that before. That exclamation mark. Probably because I don't pay attention. But there we go. Hopefully that's. Let's roll on quickly then before it all goes wrong again. Alpine, as we're talking about Wolverine, Oliver Oakes, as was kind of expected, now has been named as the new Alpine team principal. He'll replace Bruno Famin, and that'll be at the end of the summer break. I think he's coming straight in after the summer break. The announcement was pretty straightforward. Alpine is pleased to announce Oliver Oakes as new team principal. We'll start after the summer break and report to Luca De Maio. I'm going to read this, Stuart. At 36 years old, Oakes will become the second youngest team principal in Formula One history. 36. I hate him. He founded High Tech Grand Prix in 2015 and is a former racing driver and became world karting champion in 2005. That's my research into Oliver Oakes. You did a little bit of work for him, didn't you, Stuart, on livery design a few years ago? So I don't know if you've got all the inside scoop on all of this, or you were negotiating his deal with Flavio.
Yeah, I'm the source of all his power and success. It was all me from the very beginning. No, I did a bit of work for him when he was starting up High Tech. He started in Euro F3 High Tech, and when he was starting that team, he randomly asked me to make the livery for him. So which is kind of the same livery they've had ever since. So, he's an interesting guy, Ollie Oakes. He's sort of very Christian Horner, I guess, in his sort of trajectory. Started as a racer and then decided he would only get so far, and then went into management and has slowly built his way up towards F1. And who knows, now that Alpine seem to be and Renault seem to have kind of lost interest altogether, maybe he'll bring the high-tech brand all the way up to Alpine / Renault / Lotus / Benetton, whoever they are. I'd be interested to see how he gets on. Obviously, he's young and it's a big jump for him, but he's got experience in team principal role. High Tech have had decent success, I think, in the categories they've been in. They are their driver this year. He's not leading the championship in F2 at the moment, is he? I always forget his name. But he has been. Aaron. Currently, he was a championship leader.
Oh yeah. I'm with you.
A couple of races, but anyway, they've had reasonable success. No championship victories, but they've been sort of plodding along. I think they're quite good. So we'll be able to see what he could bring. He obviously, it's interesting. Alpine are going for someone. Essentially like bringing in a junior driver, isn't it? They're not bringing in someone with experience of running an F1 team or has a lot of experience in F1. They're bringing in someone from a junior category to kind of mop up the years of mess they've made. But if they can start with him and build up, I think that would be interesting. I don't think we're going to expect like huge turnaround in the next season or two. I think this is part of their, I gotta say, building operations, but I don't really know what they're doing. It's not as clear as like Williams, where Williams have a plan and they know where they want to be and they're bringing people in. Alpine, they don't even know what engine they're going to have in a couple of years, and they're essentially just a rebadged Renault. So who knows?
Yeah, so that tickled me there. They don't know what they're doing. That picture, by the way, on screen now is the only picture on XPB of Oliver Oaks that isn't him in a car. So it is from when George Russell was a junior with him. So we're going back quite a few years here. Second youngest to Christian Horner, by the way. I just checked on the old interwebs. Second youngest team principal. That's specific. So I don't know if there's another role that maybe would have changed that. But he's second youngest to Christian Horner. Which isn't a surprise, actually. That would have been my guess anyway. So, but yeah, I don't know a lot about him. I hope that he's able to get in there and sort of grab things by the scruff of the neck and try and sort that team out, because I don't know what's going on. Like you say, Stuart, nobody knows what's going on in that team at the moment. It feels sort of on a wider point on Alpine. It does feel as though we're heading towards another Renault to Lotus situation where they're not really bothered anymore and they don't really want to put the money in. They don't really want to do that, blah, 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 blah. And then somebody comes in. Maybe they keep Alpine with Mercedes engines, or high-tech come in and rename it in a sponsorship thing or something like that. And then in 3 years' time, Renault go, actually, we really want part of this again. Then it becomes Renault again. And then they start again. Then they get bored in a few years and they rename it whatever they want to rename it this week, and then they get other engines from Ferrari, and then they change their mind. It's just what they do, and it's such an odd team, and I love that team. So many great memories. Schumacher winning his 2 titles there, absolutely a real soft spot for the Enstone team. A lot of people do, actually, when you talk to them. A lot of people say they've got a soft spot for the team. Back when they're in the Benetton days, for example, Tolman. But it's a mess at the moment, and they need, and I feel like there's a lot changing. Just to confirm on Bruno Famin, he's not been sacked, has he? He's gone to work on the engine side of things, or to sort of staff out over there, hasn't he? He's not lost his job. He's still going to be around Renault. He's just not going to be on the F1 side.
As far as I understand, yes. Yeah, just leaving as team principal. And I think, as I sort of reiterate, it's not as clear what they're doing other than sort of shuffling and throwing people at it, as we've seen sometimes in other teams. They don't seem to have just like a plan of like, here's how the team structure is going to look, here's where we want everyone to be, and this is how it's going to work going forwards. Because I think there's still currently so many question marks over their sort of medium-term involvement, going forward. I think it seems very likely that Renault are going to leave as an engine manufacturer for 2026. That's the big noise thing to make. That's what Bruno Famin seems to be highly suggesting. And then, at that point, is there even a point them being a sort of Renault by name, Alpine by name, whichever one of their brands by name? Do they move to something else? Do they do what we haven't seen in a while and just become completely rebadged by whatever sponsor wants to pay for the name? I mean, they're sort of floundering at the moment. I think they need to just find their feet a little bit, and they need to decide what they want to be doing in the next 5 years. Do they still want to be here in 5 years, or do they want to hand it over, or just, and then work around that? Because right now it's just a little bit inconsistent, and I kind of feel a little bit bad for Oliver Oaks, because maybe he won't even be here in a couple of years. Maybe he'll just be someone they bring in and bring out while they're floundering. Maybe the team won't exist in 2 years. Maybe Andretti will buy them and kick him out because they're going to bring some of the American squad over to run that team. So yeah, it's definitely, he's part of something, but it's unclear if he'll be able to get his feet in long enough to make it last. Yeah, it'll be interesting to watch, but I don't think we're going to see anything massive over the next half of the season, at least.
Yeah, they're just feeling two minds, don't they, Renault? Like they're sort of willing to let the engine go, but they won't let the team go. And sort of, I feel like if you're in two minds, I don't think your heart's in it. And maybe it's best for the team. And more importantly, the personnel, the staff, that somebody comes in who does want to put everything behind it. And I think about Pierre Gasly in this moment as well. He's only recently signed an extension with them. I assume he'll have had some knowledge of what was going on, but all of a sudden this Mercedes thing, he might be thinking, hang on a minute, what's going on here? I thought I was at a works team, and now it's all sort of falling apart underneath me or whatever. And I don't know. I can't work out what they're doing. I hope they can turn something around, but if their heart's not in it and they're not going to give it 100%, I think let somebody else take it on. There have been a lot of rumours, some around a certain site maybe sponsoring them. Let's not get into that. But there's also talk of, if it's high tech, what impact does that, or what role will your Alcali have in that? Let's say it that way. That's raised a few question marks and links of a certain Nikita Mazepin maybe coming back. I think that's people putting 2 and 2 together and coming up with 5. I think if High Tech were to be the name of that team going forwards, I suspect it'd be some sort of naming rights thing. I don't know. I'm not going to say that I think Oliver Oaks will come in and buy the team. I think Renault he'll buy a stake in it maybe, and then it'll be split between all those celebrities and sports people who have bought parts of the team, and then maybe Oliver Oaks owns a bit and Renault own a bit, and then if Renault want it back in 3 years' time, they can buy everybody out, can't they? But I'm not convinced that High Tech are going to take over the whole team. So I don't think maybe that thing with the Mazepins is a thing. I'd also like to think that even though they're in turmoil, they could maybe aim a little bit higher in terms of drivers. It doesn't matter what your opinion is of him as a person, but as a driver, he was, well, frankly, shite. I know the car wasn't great, but he was awful. So, he crashed in his first race at turn 3, didn't he? There were moments where I remember going back and doing streams, and there were moments that you sort of thought, there's something here. He's improving, and maybe he's making a step. But then the next week, it all just fell apart again. So I'd like to think they came a little bit higher. On that note, we'll just move straight on. On that note, there's no point repeating the same again. On that note, Jack Doohan is apparently, according to reports, set to partner Pierre Gasly next season. There's no official announcement as we sit here and stream this, so who knows? But according to motorsport.com, their sources say the team has elected to promote Doohan, and although a final contract has not yet been signed, it is suggested the formalities will be completed imminently, and an announcement could even come before F1 shuts down for the summer break. So first things first, the summer break, much to people's surprise, doesn't start the day after Spa or the last race before. It's usually the Friday after, isn't it? And then it's 2 weeks from there. So we are now officially in the F1 summer shutdown. And there's been no announcement, so that didn't come true. So I'm not sure whether we're going to get anything in the next few days or weeks. It's unlikely if everyone's shut down, but something might slip out. You never know. But he seems to be the most likely option for them. I've seen people on social media talking about Mick Schumacher still been in the mix, but if we believe that source there, those motorsport.com sources, Stuart, Jack Doohan is going to be given the opportunity next year, which isn't a massive surprise because you've got the experience of Pierre Gasly there, so he ticks the experience box, and he's been getting the FP1 sessions this year and has been touted for a while now as the natural successor almost to Esteban Ocon. So if it gets announced, not really a surprise, but do you think those sources are probably bang on, Stuart? I know it's difficult, but...
Yeah, I think so. And I think it makes probably the most sense. Like, I wouldn't put any money on how successful he would be in that seat. It's often quite hard to know for sure when people finally move up to Formula One, like, how good they're going to be, especially in their first season. But he's got the experience in this car in these sort of ground effect era cars. He's got a pretty good record in junior series. I think I remember being quite... I'm using the wrong word, but quite impressed with him in his 2023 F2 season, because that team virtuosi had quite a bit of a struggle getting started, and he sort of got his head down and got on with it and ended up 3rd overall. I think he was quite impressive as a driver in a tricky situation. I think he wanted to enter that season kind of going for the title, but team issues meant that couldn't happen. So he seems like a solid fit for that team. I think just after Spa, he also did a week tire testing in that car, or in one of the cars. So he's definitely fully integrated in that team, and I think you're right. You know, you've got Gasly on the one side, who's got the race experience, and it's a good environment to kind of train him up on. So I think that makes a lot of sense. How how good he'll be in that car, I can't possibly say, but I think in terms of what's available, that makes sense to them. And I mean, it's not often you get an Alpine Academy driver moving up into an Alpine, is it?
No.
So that'd be nice. That would actually be nice to see. Was it the
last
summer
one?
break last year not last year, 2 years ago, when that whole Oscar Piastri stuff happened?
Yeah, it's. I think there was I can't remember the date, but it was last week was sort of the anniversary of it, which was fun. But yeah, I'm just trying to think. Who was the last Alpine or Renault Junior to move up? Was it Grosjean or was it Palmer? To be in that team, to go straight into that team, I think it was Grosjean, wasn't it?
That's back far enough for me to remember the differences between the years. But yeah, it was someone like that. I mean, we're going back 12 years or so.
Roman Grosjean. When I'm at home not streaming and I type his name, I always put Gross Gene so I remember how to spell it. It's not a comment on poor Roman. So he was promoted to F1 in 2012 to Lotus, which is basically Renault, wasn't it? We've talked about that already. So that was Lotus in 2012. Because Zhou didn't get promoted, did he?
No.
Which was a surprise actually, because he was tipped as quite a hot prospect, wasn't he, at one point by them? So and Jolyon Palmer was promoted to F1 to Lotus or to Renault in 2016. Was it really 2016 when Palmer got his chance? I thought it was earlier than that. So yeah, it would be Palmer then, wouldn't it? 2016.
Wow. Yeah, still quite a way back, isn't it? 8 years ago. Right. Well, I guess it'll be 9 years ago by next year. So yeah.
Yeah. So it's been a while.
But we know these teams in their junior driver programs, it always ends up with them picking one driver once in a blue moon and everyone else having to go and fight to get out their contracts.
Yeah, I just trying to think of an option maybe other than Doohan, just before we sort of move on to the next point, because there's not much more to say on this one. But I saw somebody mention Bottas a moment ago. Fill in the blanks. Bottas should be the goal for Alpine. Gasly and Bottas would be quite a stellar lineup, I think. I think through the grid and who's available, really. I mean, K-Mag isn't going to be at Haas, but I can't see that he's going to be at Alpine next year, to be honest. Maybe they might finally go for Zhou. If Renault decide they want to tap into the Chinese market, that might be an opportunity there, but I can't see that. Otherwise, I feel like they would have promoted him before, rather than letting him go somewhere else first and ignoring him. Maybe Logan Sargeant, who knows? We'll see. But I think, yeah, not a huge number of options out there. So maybe this is now the right time for Alpine to just, especially given that they are so massively in transition and all this talk of Mercedes engine, now's the right time to go with Jack Doohan, and it'd be good to see as well. So how many, would that be 3 Aussies on the grid? If Ricciardo stays,
as long as Ricciardo's still around. Yeah.
That's that'll please Annette and Co. Who are in Australia, probably still in bed, to be fair. Yeah, so that was it on Jack Doohan. Really, not much more to add because it is just speculation officially, because nothing's official. Final thing I want to talk about, Stuart. This won't take long at all. Before we get into some Q&A, maybe, but Andrea Stella has signed a multi-year extension to his contract as team principal at McLaren. It's a role he's held since December 2022. It doesn't feel like it was that long ago. I feel like it was much sooner than that, but no, he's been there since December 2022, has led the team to 2 Grand Prix wins, a further 18 podiums and 1 sprint win. The team's statement said in the past year, the team have confirmed multi-year extensions for drivers Lando, Norris, Oscar Piastri. Today's announcement reaffirms the long-term stability of the team in its pursuit of world championships. And Andrea Stella says it's a privilege to be part of the McLaren Formula 1 team, and I'm honoured to continue my role as team principal. Made great strides forwards in the past year and a half, and we still have a lot more work to do to consistently fight at the front of the grid. They're getting there, which poses an exciting challenge. Success comes through the team working in synergy, and I am enjoying my role, which has allowed me to help unlock individual talent and empower people to work together towards our team objectives. I'm trying to think of a question to put. Correct decision, Stuart. I don't think this is much of a debate, really, is it? I mean, he's done a fantastic job since he came in, apparently. December 2022. I mean, the stats there: 2 Grand Prix wins, a sprint win, and 18 podiums, including on the podium every race this year since China, I think.
Yeah, and 10. Yeah, the last 10 races as well have been podiums. I mean, you say December 22 seems a long time ago, but it was actually a year and a half. So we had all of last season and then half of this season. So yeah, I think that adds up. But so far, yeah, he's been brilliant. Lots of success. I think a big team player is the vibes I get from him. He's not sort of this like, and I'm not going to say if this is good or bad. Things that run differently, but some team bosses sort of become the face and the personality of the whole team, and that's sort of. But I think he's very much like about it being about the whole team and working the whole team together. It's the last couple of seasons, this one and the last one, you really get the feeling that they kind of understand themselves as a team, and I think that's part of his direction. I think even when they were struggling, like beginning of last year, they were struggling. Beginning of this year, they weren't, perfectly where they wanted to be, but they're able to move forward from that because they know exactly where their car is and where they're going with it and how to develop it. I remember very clearly the start of last year, them talking about they've got a lot of issues, but they know exactly what those issues are and how to fix them, and they have a plan for it, and they did, and they turned it around. So this is clearly now a team that is working well together and is able to develop the car and grow the team and move forwards. And I think, as we said many times, they're now the highest performing car and team on the grid. Great couple of drivers there as well, and he's managing it well. I think if one thing I would say, not necessarily all on his shoulders, but he's got to take the brunt of it as being team principal. A few times you've got the impression that they're not quite ready to be title contenders. Like they fumbled a couple of wins. They've managing their drivers mainly during races, during competitive sessions. They've kind of maybe panicked a little bit, kind of not quite Ferrari style, but a little bit. And I think that needs to be working on. I think they need to think of themselves as title contenders and behave like title contenders in terms of getting the most out of these cars when they're on track. But apart from that, yeah, great, a great signing and the obvious one.
He's very open as well, isn't he? When he's in interviews, he's quite willing to just sort of say. Obviously, he'll be careful to a point because of sponsors and things, but he seems very open and quite happy to discuss things that maybe other team bosses would keep a bit closer to their chest. So I like that about him as well. But no, I think if McLaren, as we're saying, potentially favourites now, go on to win the Constructors this year, and let's say go all out next year and get the drivers and the Constructors, I think this will be one of, when we look back in a few years' time, this will be one of the great F1 recoveries from McLaren. When you think about where they were, you sort of touched on it there, but you go back to Bahrain, 22, they were nowhere. 23, they were nowhere. And then that update in Austria last year, through the rest of the European season, the back end of last year, the way they turned things around after a bit of a shaky start this year, they've really, their leap forward has been so impressive. And he's at the heart of that. And obviously, you credit to all of them, Zach Brown, Andrea, Stella, the drivers, their engineers, everybody at the team. But it's quite amazing. I think we will look back at this as one of the great turnarounds. I'm sure there are people in chat already typing, well, this was better and that was better. But I'm just sort of thinking now, one of the greats in the future. But it's I thought we'd probably move on to Q&A, actually, Stuart, very, very quickly. Will and I were talking about this the other week, last week for the race reaction in Belgium around McLaren. Sort of 2026, and I think we've had the conversation before. We have that, McLaren may be at a slight disadvantage in 26 because they've got to fit an engine into their car, whereas a manufacturer can build the car around that engine and etc. and all of that. Do you think McLaren, given the question marks around 26, should go absolutely all out in 2025 to get both? I know that they want to win both titles and be competitive in 26, but do you think maybe go all out in 25 to get that title, a big opportunity for them to win their first drivers since 2008?
I definitely think short answer, yes. Because it's a gift horse and staring them in the face. I think they should, definitely grab it, because you cannot predict what the order is going to be in 2026. You don't know what people have got up their sleeves. You don't know how who's going to come up with the best new power unit. You don't know who's going to come up with crazy solutions to all this movable aero. You just don't know what it's going to be like in 2026 at all. And this is a goal staring them in the face that they have to aim at. I wouldn't say, take give yourselves a massive risk for 2026 because 2026 is the platform for the next goodness knows how many years.
3
I don't know
years.
when next. Yeah. So, but yeah, you've got to, and I think we can look back to 2008 for an example of someone who really fumbled that, which was BMW, who had a title shot staring them in the face with, well, their car and Robert Kubica. And sort of halfway through, they were like, nah, 2009, where it's at, there's a big rule changes. We really need to focus on that. And they kind of let 2008 go in a way. They had a chance. They were leading the championship at one point and they let it go. And then they were nowhere
and then ran
the
away
next year. And then, and then left. And now they're Sauber. So, I think it's the bird in the hand, isn't it? That's what you've got to go for.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, don't give up on 2026. That still has to be a huge part of their focus next year. But I think going for it next year makes a lot of sense for McLaren. Tricky because you have got to balance it, haven't you? You're right, you've got to balance it. But I just think if you've got a shot at the title, you go for it regardless and pick up the pieces if you need to in 26. If you're a bit behind, then so be it. But they've already shown they could turn it around, so there's no reason why they potentially couldn't do that again. But the other thing, actually, just on the constructors, which I was thinking about before we went live, just randomly came to me. On the Perez thing, I'm just wondering, and I know that I'm going to get told off by chat, but because teams, they want to win and they want to win championships, not bothered about aero testing. But with those big rules changes in 2026, do you think Red Bull looking at Perez thinking, actually, if we finish second, given the rules change on the horizon, it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world, given that we start working on 2026's car next year? Just saying.
I hear this kind of thing. A bit, and I just don't think the difference in one position in the standings is enough, especially when you're, when one of the positions could be first, because that comes with a lot of pedigree and money and being able to sell sponsorship and all that kind of stuff. I think the sort of staggered wind tunnel time and all that kind of thing is beneficial, like across the whole field. I think it's good that seems likely that Sauber will have a lot more time than Red Bull next year or over the winter to develop their car and test some things out and work on gathering data. But I think between McLaren and Red Bull next year, it's going to be fairly negligible. I think it's across the spread of the field is where you'll see the differences. So I don't necessarily think it's worth making that sacrifice, especially when you're maybe giving up a constructors title, which is for life. Not just for
for Christmas.
Christmas, yeah.
No, you're probably right. I like to just throw things out there every now and again, but because I see it on social media all the time, and one of the nicer things we see out there. So it's I sort of thought, it's a point. I still think if you give a team the choice of winning the constructors and finishing second, they're probably going to take winning it first. That's their priority. They want to win. They're racers, aren't they? At the end of the day. So it was just a cheeky question to throw out there because people like to ask that question in the comments afterwards sometimes. So, but no, you're probably right. And if we were talking about maybe like they were finishing fifth from second, then maybe. But like you say, it's not a big gain. And even if, like you say, Sauber get all that extra wind tunnel time, they're not suddenly going to be world beasts in 2026, are they? So it might not make the difference we all think it does, actually. Although I say that, but I do feel like we're not getting to this now, but I do feel like probably more on the aero side of things, the aero testing side of things, maybe the cost cap as well. It all feels like it's all starting to work a little bit now, and we're getting this. I know you're always going to get convergence in Formula 1, but it feels like it's been a little bit quicker this time, and maybe that could be linked to the regulation change. Maybe in the past, I don't know. That's probably a conversation for another day, but I think I'm a bit more positive about it all than I was 18 months ago. Mr. Negative here, whinging about it. Well, let them spend what they want. If it destroys the sport, who cares?
I need to look up the rules. This is unrelated to anything useful to say, but it's just a thought that came to me. If, let's say, Red Bull won the constructors title on paper, but I don't know, that something came out that they've been using a secret rocket booster under the car or something that hadn't been spotted, and they got disqualified from the championship. Would they get the last place wind tunnel time or not? Because they would have come last on paper, or would they still be penalised for coming first in the? Yeah, I wonder how that would play out.
I don't know what you're suggesting.
I don't know. I know you don't have the answer, but or any team that like finished first and or high up and then got disqualified. Like what would I wonder what the rules say in terms of how that translates to wind tunnel time.
Yeah, because you couldn't. Well, surely again, we don't know, do we? But surely, if that happened, you can't. You'd have to punish them on that as well. You maybe give them the least. You can't give them the most because you're rewarding it, aren't you? Almost like, oh well, It sucks, but you're going to be amazing in a year's time. Don't worry about it. So I imagine there'll be something somewhere, and we'll have a look through it. I imagine something somewhere that will be. You get disqualified and you get the least wind tunnel time or a bigger punishment, a separate punishment that goes with it. So it's a good question, though. I will go and look at this in the regulations later. If you have any questions, please do pop them in chat. We'll answer a few before we go. I did pop a poll up as well. Is Red Bull right to keep Sergio Perez ... for now, shifty eyes. 17% of you said yes, 61% said no, and 21%, a little bit like me, 22% now, said on the fence. So thank you very much for your votes on there. Please do drop a like as well. There were 300 odd votes on that poll and only 77 likes, so please do leave a like. 200 of you still here. That'd be massively appreciated. Thank you to everybody for tuning in tonight, and subscribe as well if you are new, so you don't miss out on any content coming up in the future. And there will be a lot, particularly once we get back to the season proper between now and December. Like I say, only 10 races to go, but that's a lot of races. Thank you to Rob as well for subscribing, by the way, and thank you to AC for your super chats. A member 43 months in a row says, will Perez stay in Red Bull for 2025? And AC also says, Flavio comes in, evaluates, feels engine is not good, brings Merc, relocates important staff and sells the team. There you go. That's AC's prediction. So just to answer that one quickly then, Stuart, we kind of touched on it earlier. Will Perez stay in Red Bull for 2025?
That is the question, isn't it? I'm leaning towards no, but I'm leaning towards no with the knowledge that I just don't know who they'd put in there confidently. I think no. I think they'll take a punt on someone, be it an experienced punt with Ricciardo or a sort of less experienced punt with Tsunoda. I think no.
It's an obvious answer, but it all depends on what he does, doesn't it? Between now and the end of the season, if he wins 5 of the next 10 races, then he's probably going to stay where he is, isn't he? But I don't expect him to do that. I would, based on today, the here and now. Obviously, things can change in a few weeks' time, but the here and now, I don't think he will. And like I said, I certainly don't think both of them will be there next season. I think one will maybe be in that second Red Bull seat, and then Liam Lawson will be in the RB. But they're going to have to start making decisions because Isaac Hadjar's performing really strongly in F2, as I've already mentioned. Ayumu Iwasa is doing a cracking job in Super Formula, 3rd in the championship, I believe, still. So, they've got options out there, young drivers coming through. You've got Arvid Lindblad in F3, who's doing a great job in his first season there. So the juniors are starting to come through again now, so they're going to have to start making some moves, I think, and moving people out of the way. But maybe that's something for 2020. Do you want to put a rookie in 26?
Probably not.
It's tricky, isn't it? You'd want him in for a year first. When you like Antonelli at Mercedes, for example, get him a year in the team, feet under the table, settled in, let him learn the tracks, learn how the team operates, and then let him worry about all the changes in 26.
I'd say the one thing Perez does have on his side is, and I mean this with the greatest respect, but he is an absolute pushover. Like, he will do what the team need him to do to get Max Verstappen points. And I think Max, asserts himself enough to have scored enough points quite early on to be the main driver. But Perez doesn't really fight back on that at all. Whereas I don't think Ricciardo would want to do that. I don't think Tsunoda would want to do that. I don't think a lot of younger drivers who are looking to establish themselves and win races and things would maybe be as amenable to that. Maybe they would, but I think if Perez is able to be a bit more consistent in his results, he is good at sort of playing that team game, playing that second fiddle role quite happily, it seems.
Sergeant Starburst says, I'm on the fence because Perez is a good driver, but then the car is messed up, let's say, at this point. The car's not great, but I know we're comparing Verstappen to Perez, but Verstappen is finding the results. And, Max started 11th in Belgium and finished 5th, and Perez started 2nd and finished 8th. That's not all the car. I totally get the point that's been made, but that's not all the car. I'm sorry, and I am. You are listening to the home of the great Perez defenders. We're always backing Checo.
Yeah.
We're always really trying to defend him as best we can, but it's very difficult to when he's not performing. So I get the point now. Moray says, do you think that Russell's DSQ was too harsh? I think considering the car was 0.18% illegal and got disqualified when Red Bull broke the cost cap, it was 1.6% and didn't get DSQ'd is a massive FIA inconsistency. I disagree, Moray, because that's two completely different things. If your car is illegal, it doesn't matter if it's by 0.0001%, it's still illegal and it has to be disqualified. Otherwise, you open up this can of worms and all these grey areas. And yeah, but it was only 1%, it was only 0.5%, it was only 2%, then it becomes 3%, and suddenly, do you know what I mean? It causes so many problems. If a car is underweight, if the plank has had too much shaved off it or anything like that, it has to be a disqualification because it's just going to open too many grey areas. And I'm telling you now, and you'll know this, Moray, teams will bloody exploit that. They will exploit that to within an inch of its life if they can, and then we're just going to have a right mess. And sort of the cost cap thing, it's not an FIA inconsistency. That's a whole new set of regulations, not even related to the disqualification penalty, I guess is what I'm saying. So I can't compare the two, and I don't consider it an inconsistency. But in terms of was it too harsh, it was unlucky for George, but by the letter of the law, and to be fair, Stuart, it's underweight, it's illegal. They have to disqualify him.
Yeah, I think it was just tremendously unlucky, and it was a shame because it was a great drive from Russell and really impressive, and I loved seeing. Not just from Russell, but the range of strategies people were trying out, and Russell going brave and making it work. So it was a sort of a shame that like he went all out to get that unlikely win and pull off a strange strategy only to have it taken away. But yeah, it has to be kind of a hard line rule. It has sort of kind of similar to the lines at the edge of the track. You're either in or you're out, and he was out, and you can't be kind of playing around in those areas. So yeah, it's just. It is what it is, and it's a shame. And I don't think anything's. I might be wrong. I don't think anything is as definitively come out from Mercedes as to what exactly caused it. There's been talk about like tire wear and plank wear and sort of him running a bit longer and stuff. So fuel and a bigger, faster race, but nothing concrete, I don't think. But anyway, yeah. I think harsh is the wrong word, but sort of it being a big shame, I think, is how I describe it.
There was something last week, and this might be what you were talking about. Andrew Shovlin said that the possible contributing factors were... Where's the list? I just have a list. I can't find it now, can I? The car can lose quite a lot of weight during the race. You get tyre wear, plank wear, brake wear, oil consumption. Drivers themselves can lose a lot. And in this particular race, George lost quite a lot of weight. I could drive an F1 car for an afternoon. There we go. So that's solved. Put the salad away. The car started the race the same weight. Lewis and George are both weighed after qualifying. Cars within 500 grams. George's car was the only one that had the problem, and it is because things like the tyre wear was much higher. So actually, no, you're right, Stuart. They've not specified one thing, have they? They've mentioned tyre wear a couple of times, but they talked about plank wear, oil consumption, brake wear, the drivers losing weight. So, but what I will say is it's for something that's usually quite a controversial thing when the driver gets disqualified, it's not been that controversial a reaction. A lot of people, like Moray, saying it's a little bit unfair that it's such a small margin the driver has to suffer, but that's the way the rules have to be done. Otherwise, like you say, the white line, you're either in or you're out. It's going to cause chaos if not, isn't it? But the team seem quite accepting that it's their error. They've taken it on the chin. George will obviously be gutted, but he seems to have accepted these things happen. So it's not caused the uproar that some of these disqualifications. Thinking of not Sergio Perez at all, Sebastian Vettel in Hungary a few years ago caused quite the stir on socials, didn't it? But I think that's because it was Seb, and everyone loves Seb. So yeah, no, I just think the team have accepted it as their error, and that's what they have to do. It's not, again, I said it last Sunday. Russell did absolutely nothing wrong. It's as simple as that, and it's a team error, and it catches you out. But it's amazing how these things come round, Stuart. It was the first time a winning driver had been disqualified from a race since Michael Schumacher at Spa exactly 30 years ago.
Wow, that's a stat.
unless somebody's done the research into it and found something I've missed, but I think that was the last time it was, and it's amazing. It's like the same track. No, not they weren't. Sorry, I was going to say something else, and I was wrong. Don't say it, Sean. Same track, 30 years exactly. Quite amazing, isn't it? Just the way it works in sport a lot, doesn't it? I suppose because there's a lot of it that these things sort of line up. So there we go. Pascal, thank you very much for your super chat, by the way. Says good stream again. Are you going to do a mid-season review during the summer break? I hope Bottas stays at Sauber. So again, thank you for your support, Pascal. Hope you're doing all right. I think by the way on the Bottas thing, I think Bottas has a great chance of staying at Sauber, given that quite a lot of drivers now that Audi seem to be prioritising are being snapped up, and I think looking at options now, Hulkenberg, Bottas for next year, maybe look for a driver if they want to bring somebody else in 26, see what happens with the market, might be an idea, but I think Bottas actually has a very good chance of staying actually now. It might not be a very exciting choice, but you know, it's experience, isn't it? In terms of mid-season review during summer break, it's, again, Pascal said earlier, that I always, in August, when it's summer break, I always try to take one whole week away from socials because, as Stuart will testify from when he's done content creation, it can get very, sometimes. So that's an understatement. So I try to do that sort of 1 week in August, which is this week, apart from today, obviously. But there's also everything I talked about last Sunday going on behind the scenes, and that's taking up time. So it all depends on whether that gets over the line between now and sort of the next few days and the next week, and then maybe the answer to that was maybe we'll see what happens. But I thought I'd give you a 9-hour answer if that's all right, Pascal. You know me. CPB says, like McLaren, do you think Red Bull will throw everything at next year to try and secure Max a 5th world title, or will they focus on 26? And do you think Ford will be competitive? Good question, that one actually. Yeah, Red Bull. I mean, you could argue, Stuart, even though they are sort of, yes, they've got Ford involved, I think, on the electric side more than anything, I think, but they're going to be involved in that, and yes, they're going to have that experience of working with Honda and using their intellectual property over the last couple of years, but actually you could argue there's more of a question mark over Red Bull on the engine side than what I was saying about McLaren, because even though they are technically going to be a works team with Ford involved and they can build the car around that engine, we don't know how good that engine is or isn't going to be, do we?
No, I'm fascinated to find out how that power unit turns out, the sort of Red Bull Ford team thing, you know, finally letting go of their relationship with Honda and moving forward sort of half on their own, I guess. They've been building up that power unit. I mean, their relationship with Honda has been so funny anyway, that Honda has sort of gone, but they didn't really go, and now they're back, and anyway, there's a lot of question marks over that. We have no idea how well they're going to respond to it, but we know Red Bull are very good at this. Like, then, you know, the 2022 change in regulations, you know, they were fighting for a championship in 2021, won it, and as a constructors, as drivers, and then went straight into 2022 on top. You know, it can be done. They don't have to throw everything at 2025 without losing out in 2026, and they know how to do it. So yes, it'll be interesting. But as we said earlier in the stream, a lot of their key people have been walking out of the door, so they need to manage that, the stability of their sort of personnel and teams, while managing fighting in a current and future championship. So that's going to be a real question. And yeah, as you say, bringing in a new engine partner. So yeah, a lot of things to juggle in the next couple of years. I think they will be going all out for 2025, but they will definitely have to put a lot of energy into 2026 as well, or they could just be left behind if they're not careful.
Yeah, there are quite a few teams I'm fascinated by for 26. Red Bull, obviously, one of them, with them building their own engine effectively. And Ford, but that's the other thing. Ford have got a lot of experience in obviously the motor industry. You know, they've been around a little while now, Ford. But they've not been in F1 for a long time, have they? And this is kind of going to be all new to them as well. So it's all right having that experience of Ford behind you, but actually, on the F1 side of things, it's been a long time. So you've sort of got not two rookies, but you've got two new groups coming together to work on something that one has only just recently started working on and one hasn't worked on for a long time. So it's going to be a really interesting one to keep an eye on. That and Audi, I think, are the two that intrigue me the most. Obviously Mercedes as well, because talk already that they've got the power unit to beat. Again, as I said earlier, with it being an big aero change to regulations, active aero and things, it won't all be about the power unit. But if Mercedes have got that advantage again, then they might head on to another run of domination. But I'm hoping that I'm still hoping that F1 just randomly, because they like to be random and for the lols, decides just to abandon the 26 regulations and maybe push them back to like 2030, something like that, maybe 2035, and just let this carry on as it is and let's just see what happens. Because I think 2025 could be, I'm going to put the mockers on it now, I could be a 2012 style season. I think it could be brilliant. I mean, we're sort of heading that way anyway, aren't we?
We're all geared up for it, aren't we? Everyone, the convergence has been incredible. I'm really looking forward to next year, and yeah, you're right. I am. While I am interested in changes in regulations, I do feel like it's sort of coming at a bad time in terms of where the sport is right now. It came but if you're right as to what you said earlier, and the sort of the staggered wind tunnel time and all that stuff allows teams to converge quickly over a couple of seasons, then hopefully it won't be too much of a disruption, and maybe it won't be at all. Maybe we'll have a bunch of teams who are all fighting pretty closely in 2026. We don't know, but yeah, I do want to see more of what we're seeing right now on track, and looking forward to Ford. It's interesting, isn't it? Ford is sort of completing the circle, because Ford sold their Formula One team 20 years ago to Red Bull.
Yeah.
And now they're sort of back to be part of it again. So yeah, excited about that.
Yeah, they I mean, they had in a capacity, they had a relationship with Ford back in the Sauber Ford days, because they had the Red Bull sponsorship, didn't they? I know not the same thing, but they still had that tie there. So maybe it's just something that is, like you say, going full circle now. Reunited, best of friends. I'm sure it's all going to go down brilliantly, and probably best at Ford. Don't ask Renault what happens if the engine isn't very good. But again, just to make the point, because I do know Ford aren't building the power unit, they're working with Red Bull, aren't they, on certain aspects, so it's not going to be quite the same as the Renault days, but maybe that's the answer. Maybe Renault and Red Bull need to get back together again, because that drama was fun. We miss you, Cyril Abiteboul. Not quite to that extent, Lee. I don't think we quite need that to happen, but we could push the regulations back. I'd be fine with that one. Even with DRS, Spa was hard for overtaking, says Mikey. I've seen somebody else mention that the DRS was too short in Spa. But then it doesn't need to be too much longer than that if it is going to be longer, because we don't want people breezing past halfway down the straight. It felt closer to, as I said last week, it felt closer to being the right length, because it was just starting to get cars along. I was like, maybe it needed another 5 or 10 meters just so it did get people alongside each other into the corner, but it just felt just ever so slightly too short. But I'd rather it was slightly too short than too long, because then you've just got people breezing past the straight, and then we get that little overtake of the day thing appears on the bottom of the screen, and you go, what overtake? A DRS overtake halfway down the Kemmel Straight is not an overtake. By definition it is. I appreciate that, but it's not going to win overtake of the day, is it? So I think you said on Twitter, didn't you, Stuart, that you thought maybe similar, I don't know, or that you thought it was about the right length?
Yeah, I thought it was much improved over previous years, when it was just too long and that Kemmel Straight was just too easy to get past people. I know some people were a bit upset that they weren't as many overtakes and it was harder, but I felt like, again, I agree, maybe if you want to give it like a few more meters length, fine, but I felt it felt about right, because it felt like overtaking was hard but achievable. Like, people were overtaking and people were threatening, but it wasn't just a done deal. I like it around that area, so yeah, maybe make it a little bit easier, maybe just a fraction, but I think it was much closer to where you want it to be. And it's a difficult science, isn't it? Like, planning how long the DRS is going to be, you sort of have to hone it in year on year, and then the cars change year on year, so it's maybe never going to be perfect. And I also think it's interesting that it kind of showcases when it is maybe too short for some people's tastes, that unfortunately maybe DRS is still kind of needed, because if you hamper it too much, then you don't get the overtakes you want. But yeah, it was much closer to where I wanted it to be. Still
kind of needed, but we're losing it, aren't we, for 26? I know it's been replaced by something else, but more bonkers.
Yeah, we're getting the energy boosts, which I think IndyCar have. We're getting that kind of thing. We're kind of a push to pass kind of system.
which is probably better. That's the one thing with DRS. You lose a strategical element, don't you? Push to pass. When we had the old Kers back in there, when we had the old Kers, that there was a part of that was driver strategy, wasn't it? And deploying it in the right place to make a move or using it to defend. I think that was always better to me. I understand why DRS was brought in, but yeah. We'll see what happens in 26. It's going to be interesting. Definitely going to be interesting. Let's see what people are asking in chat. Any more questions before we wrap up for today? I've already answered that from Lee, so we won't see that one. Bring in Formula E charge zone, says Mikey. That's a question, Stuart. You might know. I don't know. I know you said you're not really following Formula E at the moment because it's on. It's paying. I have to pay a fortune to watch something that's meh. But. Are they bringing in fast charging pit stops? Is that still a thing they were aiming for? I've not kept up with it at all.
I'm not sure. They definitely were trying to bring it in for this generation of thing, and they couldn't. They wasn't working or something. But I don't know if it's still coming, or whether they've abandoned it or not, or whether it will come in with the every generation of car. I think has like a Spec B version. I can't remember what it's called now, but it has like a sort of Spec B version, and maybe they'll bring it in for that. But yeah, I'm unsure what they're doing over there. I know they were struggling to make that work. It seems unlikely we're going to get it in F1 anytime soon. But yeah, at some point it'd be great to talk about the 2026 rules because they are fascinating, and I'm slightly worried about them in a number of ways. But they are really interesting.
Yeah, we can have a chat about that one day. I'm sure we can find the time. I'm not great on the technical side, so that might be a Stuart stream. I'll sit here and go, no, something like that, you know. I heard F1 was saying about a younger driver race in F1. I'd be more interested in a team principal race, says Moray. I read that. Was it on the race? I think we're talking about this junior driver race after or in place of the Abu Dhabi Young Driver Test. But I think complications around TV rights, rolls eyes, cha-ching, TV rights and how you'd factor that in for engine allocations and things like that made it a bit complicated. So I think conversations are ongoing. We know the point system isn't changing. That's the other thing I think that was actually before the last race, so maybe don't need to talk about that. But the point system isn't changing for next year, which was rumoured, but I feel like since then the field has sort of converged a bit, and that fear that smaller teams weren't going to be able to score points has kind of disappeared a little bit now. But I know we've got changes to regulations as well on the red flag situation in after what we saw in China. I'm trying to find it. The regulation around stopping on track during qualifying read any driver whose car stops on the track during the qualifying session or the sprint qualifying will not be permitted to take any further parts in that session. That's been added following, I think, what happened with Carlos Sainz. Or was that that was the regulation then? It's been changed now to anybody who receives assistance. Sorry, if I'm correct on that, Stuart. Just double checking now. I'm trying to do it all on the fly here. So it was that you couldn't take part if you stopped, but now you can't take part if you receive assistance. So Sainz would still have been able to continue because he continued without assistance. But if a marshal gives you a push, then you won't be able to take part in a session. But also there was a revision to 54.3. After Alonso didn't take his penalty over into the next race because it was in a sprint. And they said if any of the penalties above are imposed upon a driver and that driver is unable to serve the penalty due to being unclassified in the sprint session or the race, in the case of a retirement from a sprint or the race, or the stewards impose a grid penalty on the driver for the next... We'll try it again. I just read two sentences at the same time. That was quite a talent. So if any of the penalties above are imposed upon a driver, so that's your, 5-second time penalty for leaving the track and getting an advantage or something like that, and the driver is unable to serve the penalty due to being unclassified in the sprint session or the race, or due to retirement from the sprint session or the race, the stewards may impose a grid place penalty on the driver in the next race. So that would mean that had that rule been in place, Alonso's penalty would have carried over to the Grand Prix. That's correct, isn't it, Stuart? Because he retired from the sprint, didn't he?
Yeah.
And that caused confusion. Sorry.
Yes, that's right. Yes. So instead of it just sort of disappearing into the ether because there was no rule that said that the penalty had to go somewhere. It now just goes forward into the Grand Prix, into some kind of grid penalty, which makes sense. It means you can't kind of circumnavigate penalties by retiring the car or whatever. You still need to pay for it, whatever it was that you got.
Yeah, the red flag one as well. That's like I say, outside assistance. That cleans that up a little bit, but there's a lot of people will still inevitably say, it doesn't really fix the issue because drivers can now, spin out, not deliberately, crash out on track and stop and then get going again, and it can cause a red flag and it punishes other drivers who haven't made a mistake or whatever. And so some will argue that should be if you cause a red flag, full stop, you don't get to continue, or your fastest lap time's deleted or something like that. But at least that's been partially cleared up. There was quite a fuss on social media again. 15th time I've mentioned socials today, but there was around China about how Sainz would be allowed to continue, then he wouldn't be allowed to continue, and the regulation said he can't, but actually he can. And it's what happens when you have a set of regulations and you just keep adding to them, isn't it? You're just going to cause all sorts of chaos. So at least they try to tie it up a little bit, which is good. If Ricciardo doesn't get the Red Bull seat for 25, will he retire from F1 altogether? Will Perez also retire if he gets dropped? And where does Lawson go if he leaves Red Bull? That's CPB1 with 3 questions there, technically, but I'll let you off. Well, I think Ricciardo said it's Red Bull or bust, hasn't he? So if he doesn't get a seat at Red Bull either next year or the following year or any time in the future, I think he will walk away from F1. I can't... If Perez was to be dropped, unless Audi wanted to take a punt on him for 26, I can't see where he goes if he is dropped. And if Lawson leaves Red Bull, I think the last time I read a rumour on Lawson leaving Red Bull's program, he was linked to Audi as well, but I'm just trying to think of a driver who hasn't been linked to Audi this year, to be honest. So I think Lawson could end up somewhere like there, maybe an Alpine or something like that. I don't know, but if all of that happens, Lawson will be in an RB anyway. So Perez at Alpine's a good shout, actually. CPB, yeah, Perez at Alpine with that experience, also like Gasly, the Red Bull rejects team wouldn't be terrible.
Yeah. I think that makes sense for him, that sort of middle tier F1 team. They could be really good next year. You just don't know with Alpine. Now, Lawson, if I remember rightly, I think he by sometime in September, Red Bull need to, put up or shut up. I think his contract states if they don't give him a drive and sign him up by September, he's free to walk. So that's a kind of time period, a month or so, depending on whether it's early or late September. It is when sort of the Lawson effect kicks in. So Red Bull are going to have to start thinking about making some decisions. Having said that, I don't know what Lawson would think his other options are if he decides to walk away. So maybe he's not that much of a flight risk. But yeah, you were. And as you said, Ricciardo, yeah, I think this is it. I think he either RBs, Red Bulls, or leaves. I don't think he's going to faff around for too much longer. And there's plenty of fun racing for him to do outside of F1, should he wish. And I think he'd enjoy that.
And as we've said many times before on this channel, Stuart, F1 is seen as a pinnacle of motorsport, but it's not the be-all and end-all. Like you say, there's lots of great racing out there that he could be involved in. So I'm sure he'll find something, or he'll just go off and, I don't know, become an influencer, maybe. I think he's got the personality for it, so why not?
Yeah.
We'll see, but I can't see. Also, I can't see who takes him if he is available, to be honest. I don't, he has shown improvement at RB, but is that improvement enough for an Audi to go, let's give him a shot? I'm not convinced it is. So I think it's Red Bull or nothing, I think, for him. A couple more comments then. CP actually asked that, says Flavio would love Carlos Slim's cash. That's a good point, yeah. Wish V says Sean, will Max leave RB in 2026? I mean, Red Bull. This whole naming thing is so stupid. RB, Red Bull, V Carb, whatever. So Red Bull, yeah. I think he's more likely to leave for 2026 than he is for 2025, I think. But I say that Mercedes can't wait until 2026 for him to make a decision, can they? They need a decision now, really. So any more exits from Red Bull or any more drama or the car continues to go backwards, I wouldn't be totally shocked if he did move to Mercedes for next year, but I still think 26 is probably the most likely. But there is always this thing as well, isn't there, Stuart, with Verstappen hanging over his head, that he might just turn around in 25 or 26 and go, do you know what, I'm leaving Red Bull, and then someone goes, where are you going to? And he goes, home. And that's it, and we don't see him again in F1. He's flirted with the idea a lot about just retiring quite early and not sticking around until he's 40, so I can't see him leaving. I just can't see him leaving at the end of this year. I don't know why, I just can't.
No, me neither. And his options are limited as well. And I think
Yeah.
he knows this team loves him, and he knows they'll be, despite what he sounds like on the radio, he knows that they're fully behind him in securing as many wins as possible. So I think that's where he'll stay for the foreseeable. And then, maybe if he can't find anywhere to go in 2026 and he's not that interested in Red Bull, maybe he'll do something else, go to some other series. As is, he has shown a lot of interest in continuing to race, but not necessarily with Formula One. I think he is interested in going to other places and racing and other things. I think he finds that interesting. I know he loves his sim races. It's kind of an extension of the kind of other things he likes to do. So I think we might see him going somewhere at some point before the end of the decade.
The thing with Verstappen, though, that I think we have to remember, and it's easy to forget, I think, given how long he's been around and the titles he's got, if he was to decide at the end, let's say he gives Red Bull the chance to turn the car around next year and they can't and he goes them off and then decides to take some time out, even if he takes a couple of years off a sabbatical, he can still come back before he turns 30. Isn't that sickening?
Yeah.
He's 26. He turns 27 in September. So if he was to race next year, that would be 28, and then take a couple of years after that, he would come back when he's 30. I mean, that's bonkers, isn't it? And you look at, Fernando Alonso, 302 or whatever, 41 now, is he, Fernando? Something like that. Yeah, 43.
42, jeez, I think.
43. Fernando, you've shocked us all. That's the most shocking news of the week. There you go. 43. So, Max could come back at 30 and still do another 13 years if he wanted to. So, maybe that's what he will do. We'll see. Lewis is 40 in January, isn't he? Which is, Christ.
It's mad, isn't it? It's hard to think of him as an old man, as a 40-year-old man. But no, you're absolutely right. Yeah, Verstappen can go off and do whatever the hell he wants. He can go to WEC, he can do some rallying, he can try whatever he wants, and he could do 5 years somewhere else and come back in his early 30s and then rock it again. And people will want him. So he's got options. He can do what he wants, to be honest.
Morris says, if I was Toto, I'm not convinced I would want the Marco Yost baggage that comes with Max. Because I think if I was Toto, I would give Max everything he wanted to get him in that car. But I sort of get what you're getting at. Yeah, he will come with baggage. Whether Marco and that follow, I don't know. I mean, Yost wouldn't he, because he's his father, but I don't know if Marco would follow. CPB says, no, we need Max at Audi, damn it. There you go. Maybe there you go. Take a couple of years off and then come back when Audi comes strong. You never know. I wonder what the team dynamic looks like for any team that Max moved to, says Eddie. Just trying to flick through some comments, so I'll give a few people a shout out. We're doing this just before we round off for the day. If Red Bull give him a rubbish car in 25, Max is gone. That's from Marta. That could all come down to that. If the car's terrible, why is he going to stick around? He's won his championships, hasn't he? So, Clanson, will Alonso retire? Is there a specific date? Just ever? I think he will eventually, I'm sure. But maybe when he's in a hotel, maybe he's in a home, maybe. When will he retire? There we go. End of 2027. There you go.
Oh.
Don't know why. The Aston turns out to be pretty spicy in 26. Goes quite well, but then 27, they have a bad year and he decides he doesn't want to do it anymore. There you go. And Yuki takes his place.
All right, write that down. Remind him of this in 3 years.
Hey, I did a video like 5 years ago predicting when Max Verstappen would first win a world championship, and I was right. So there you go, chat. Back off. It's the only thing I've got right in 7 years, but Toto surely can't take Max if he actually believes in George and Kimi Antonelli, can he? Question marks. So that's from Vashek. No, that's fair, I suppose. Russell is one of their juniors, Antonelli's the other, but there are drivers on the, Max Verstappen, Lewis Hamilton. I guess you can still throw Fernando Alonso in there. Drivers like that become available. If they are available or tell you they're available, you've got to try. I think as a team boss, you're not doing your job properly if you don't at least ask the question. So you can always move George off to Williams. I'm joking. But he was linked with Audi, wasn't he, Stuart, recently? Was George Russell, I think. Again, but who hasn't?
Yeah,
I was last week. So.
Everyone and their mother, yeah. But yeah, you're right. I'm struggling whether I see Toto doing it, but it's the same thing with Ferrari, right? Ferrari went for Hamilton, which in some ways seems mad. You're letting go of Sainz. You've got this fairly young, hot driver pairing, and you give one of them up for this sort of golden goose for a couple of years. People do it. Like he's he's a proven talent, and Verstappen even more so. So I think it'd be a hard one to turn down, wouldn't it? Even if it kind of disrupts your team. I think it might come back to bite him if he did do it though, in the medium term.
But also, there's nothing wrong with keeping Kimi Antonelli in F2 for another year, because I don't think he's going to win the title this year. He might be an outsider for it, but I mean, it feels like sometimes in F2 this year nobody wants to win it. So, but I don't think he's going to do it this year. Bring Max in. Let's pretend. Let's play. It's all happened. Max comes in for 2025. Kimi Antonelli stays in F2. You've got Russell and Verstappen there. Even if Antonelli wins F2 in 2025, you could still keep him back as like Piastri was at Alpine, keep him back as a reserve, but actually, treat him properly and get him signed up until the end of sort of 26. Then in 27, you've got a choice of Verstappen and Antonelli or Russell and Antonelli. So there's ways that they could go about it, but just also always bear in mind with Mercedes, the reluctance in the past to promote their juniors straight to the main team. Always remember that with Mercedes. There's always that question mark there for me. So, but I think we're going to round it up there. I was going to stop about 5 minutes ago, but they asked a question about Antonelli and I had to answer it. So there we go. Mick Schumacher's answer. Get the viewing figures in from Germany, says Nick. Right. Yes, then we can have a German Grand Prix. Back to Hockenheim. That would be great. And Vashik says Russell and Verstappen would finish about 4 Grand Prix. maybe. Thank you very much, Stuart. It was a bit of an impromptu stream, I suppose, wasn't it? I didn't ask you till Friday. So thank you very much for coming along at relatively short notice. It was good to chat F1 with you. And hopefully in the future I'll be able to do these live streams and videos when the news actually goes out rather than a week later. Hopefully.
It's always good to have time off.
Yes.
Plus, there's this other sport happening. Doesn't have any motors in it that sort of people seem really interested in. So, but yes, thank you for having me. It's been great to chat F1 even in the summer break.
Yeah, I was going to say something then, and I'm not going to. I'll message you it later. It's not appropriate for the stream. Thank you very much, Stuart. It's been great as always, and I'm sure talk to you very soon.
Ta-ra for now. I'm going to go back and watch the pole vaulting.
Oh, you read my mind. Anyway, cheers, Stuart.
Bye.
Yes, thank you to Stuart and to you guys as well for tuning in. Yes, go watch the Olympics if you've got some time. Always good fun. Please do leave a like. We're 2 away from 100. Come on, we can get there before I finish rounding off. So please do drop a like. Don't forget to subscribe as well if you're new. Lots of content coming up as the year goes on. Just to reiterate the point again, this is supposed to be my week off social media, so there might be some content later in the week, there might not, but there definitely will be the week afterwards. And what that content is and when it's out all depends on what happens between me saying this and next week, basically. So a lot going on. Hopefully I have some answers for you soon, and we'll talk about it when I can. I promise. Absolutely. So yes, thank you very much for your company this evening. It's been a pleasure. Thanks for your super chats as well. Always nice to see them come in, so thank you. Likes and subs and all that business. I'm trying to think of something else I wanted to say. I don't think there is. I think that's it. I think we're done. Yes. But as ever, I'll sign off now. Thank you for watching. I've been Sean. This has been the F1 Word. And until next time, goodbye.